And I just want to mention that this is the first time I've done a job like this. This video is for those of you like me. I couldn't go online and find a video that if you have any comments or suggestions for me, I welcome your feedback. Just go ahead and leave me a comment, and I would appreciate that. And make sure once you get the caliper off, you prop it up on something so you're not putting any pressure on the brake line. The next step is to get the rotor off. On mine, the drum was seized to the hub. It was just rusted on there. I kind of beat on it for a while with a dead blow, but that wasn't really doing the trick. So penetrating oil, but knocker loose is supposed to work really well. So I just kind of shot it into all of these gaps here where the lug came through, and let it set for a couple hours, and a couple taps is all it took, and the drum freed right up. It slid right off. And now that I got the drum rotor off, I say drum rotor, it's a rotor for the disc brakes, but it's also got a drum inside for the emergency brake, is like a drum brake setup. So the next step, we're taking the axle out. This plate right here is attached to the axle. It runs through into the diff, and we've got to take this out in order to get the hub off. These bolts are all 18 millimeter, and make sure you have a catch pan underneath, because even though you got the truck jacked up higher on this side, you're still going to get some oil dripping out. So and then it looks like it wants to come. Alright, so I got my axle popped loose. There's this seal just inside that kind of presses on the inside radius of that hub, so that was just kind of tight. I was able to pull it out far enough by hand just to get a gap in there, and just really gently used a pry bar just to pop it out the rest of the way. It really didn't take much effort, and all I got is just a little trickle of that differential oil into the pan. So we're doing good. When the axle comes out, it's really important to find a safe, clean place to set it so it doesn't get damaged. We got these splines here. Just make sure you put it in a spot where it's going to stay clean and it's not going to get knocked over or something. I'm sitting in the bed of my truck on a nice clean rag. Alright, so the next step is going to be taking out the hub locking nut. In there's a special tool for that looks like this. It's basically a 4-prong special socket. The locking nut, it has it kind of makes like a clicking, ratcheting sound when you back it out or tighten it. So I'll kind of show you what that sounds like. So that's normal. And it doesn't take much. You just kind of back it out the rest of the way by hand. And that's what it looks like. Once you got that hub nut out, put it in a safe place up there with your axle, and as you can see, now your hub is free. So in order to take this hub off, I don't know if it's necessary, but I got a puller here. I just use a big fat socket to push up against the spindle. It's something to give me a surface to seat my puller shaft on while I turn this down. So it's going to kind of pull this out. It's basically is just the inner seal needs to push past the spindle. So I'm just gonna and it looks like we're here's the inner bearing. This is called a oil slinger. Sits between the inner bearing and the gasket. Make sure to pay attention to the orientation. The tabs face out toward the bearing, and be really careful not to lose this or damage it, because this is, to my understanding, a dealership part. And when I pulled my hub assembly away, it looks like the seal stayed on the spindle. It didn't come out with the hub, so next step is to pry that away. So I'm kind of just walking around the outside edge of it with a pry bar, just gently working it off there. And that's our inner seal. Go ahead and clean this spindle up and start reassembling. So I kind of stuffed a rag in here, the end of the spindle, because that opens up right back into the differential. We don't want to blow any debris, any sand or rust or dirt back in there and contaminate the differential fluid. And the objective is basically to get any loose debris, get this spindle surface as clean as possible, because we don't want to damage our new bearings. So I'm gonna just knock any of this loose rust and dirt off the back as much as I can. You want to be gentle, don't use anything abrasive, because these surfaces need to stay smooth. We're just going to clean it up, probably use some brake parts cleaner, and go ahead and reassemble it. Okay, so I've got the new bearing races installed. Basically what I had to do to get the old races out is you just use a 3/8 socket extension or something similar. Basically have to hammer the bearing races out. So you use a socket extension or something, you catch the back lip of the race from the back side, and you just drive it through. You want to kind of walk it around and hammer it out evenly, until the race comes out the other side. And then when you install the new race, I use some grease, just kind of give it a real light coat of grease on the inside surface. And you want to drive that new bearing race in as evenly as possible. So what I used, I took my old bearing race, set it on top of the new bearing race, and just start tapping on it, evenly. You don't want to drive one side down farther than the other side, so you just keep going back and forth until you get it driven in there. Once you get it in there, race is about flush with this top surface, take it out, and then you just start using your socket extension the same way as you drove it out, and just kind of use this outside lip and drive it in as evenly as possible. Now you definitely want to put new bearing races in. Don't leave your old races in and just change out the roller part of the bearing, because these bearings they wear together. The race and the roller assembly wear together. So if you put a new roller assembly into a worn race, it's gonna destroy your bearing. So do yourself the favor and do it right. And I also want to mention I cleaned the inside of this whole hub assembly really well. Brake parts cleaner, clean rags, just get every bit of grease out of there, because that's trapping dirt particles, it's trapping rust from the disassembly. If you made any metal shavings when you were driving the old races out, wipe it down, clean out every last bit of that old grease, use brake parts cleaner, clean rag, whatever you got to do, and get it as clean as you can before you start installing the new bearings. The next thing that you want to do is you want to pack your new bearings with grease. So they are lubricated by the rear end, the fluid in the rear end. The only reason that you're packing these is because they're not going to be lubricated at first. It's going to take a little bit for that rear end oil to work its way up into these. So to prevent them from running dry, it's a good idea to pre-pack them with some grease. I've got some wheel bearing grease right here. We're just going to pack it, work it in from the outside until it's coming out all the way around, and that'll protect the bearing until it gets until the rear end oil has a chance to work its way into the bearing.
Until you got it kind of coming out the rollers all the way around.
It's kind of squeezing through this top side. That's a real good indication that you got it packed well. I'd call that a packed bearing. Getting ready to install the new seal. This is the inner bearing, by the way. It's going to face in toward the axle. Here's my new seal. So prior to installing this new seal in there, what I did, I went ahead and took a rag, had a little bit of brake parts cleaner on it, and I cleaned up the inside lip right here. And you want to install it as evenly as possible. So you kind of seat it by hand and just go around, make sure that you've got it nice and even. None of the sides are pushing down any farther than the others. And then what I'm going to use a piece of wood on here, so that way when I hammer on it, I'm not damaging the ring or the seal or anything. And we're just going to kind of work it in there until it's seated all the way down. Don't forget your oil slinger. I forgot that the first time. This little guy right here. That's an important piece. It goes with the tabs facing toward the bearing, and it kind of cups that bearing, and the flat smooth side faces out toward the seal. Yeah, I forgot that the first time. Hammered my seal all the way home before I realized it, so I had to pry my seal out. I'm praying that my seal is not ruined, but yeah, do yourself a favor and make sure you put that slinger in prior to installing your seal. Alright, so I've got my hub, I've got the outer bearing packed and installed now. Inner bearings packed and installed. The seal is installed. We're ready to reinstall the hub. So this lock nut has a key on there, and there's a keyway in the spindle. So line that up, get it started. And I think the tricky part is going to be just getting these threads started. There we go. So you get that kind of lined up and you get the threads started and first couple of turns, and it's going on pretty smooth now. So I pushed that hub on as far as I could by hand. It felt like the that seal kind of squeezed over the shoulder on that spindle back there, so I think that's all the way on. I want to tighten this down by hand as much as I can, and then we're going to have to torque this hub nut the rest of the way down. Alright, that's as far as I can go by hand, and we're going to get the torque wrench out. The torque spec that it calls for, if you're installing a new bearing, it says to torque the hub nut to 60 foot-pounds and then back it off 5 clicks. And that's what we're going to do because we got new bearings. Now, if you happen to be reusing the same bearings because you're just taking it apart to change out a bad wheel seal, for used bearings it recommends 60 pounds and then you back the nut off 7 clicks. But we're only doing backing it off 5 clicks because this is a new bearing. So as we torque this down, you want to keep spinning the hub, and it helps to get a nice even torque. It's just going to help us torque the torque that nut down without damaging anything. Make sure nothing binds. Alright, so now the hub's gotten a little bit more difficult to turn by hand. Still trying to get my 60 foot-pound click here. There it goes. So we've got it at 60 foot-pounds. The hub will still turn, but there's some noticeable drag on it. So I'm going to go ahead and reverse this. 5 clicks per the Haynes manual. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Spinning nicely, absolutely no play. And I believe we are ready for the axle. Alright, so get ready to put the axle in. Just notice that it does have a rubber seal back here that seals the differential fluid from leaking out this outer part of the hub. I'm not going to bother changing that at this point because if it starts leaking in the future, it's honestly a really easy, not involved at all repair. Mine hasn't leaked yet. And it's not something that they carried at O'Reilly either. So I figure we'll just reinstall this one and cross that bridge when we come to it if it does decide to leak. It's not going to be a major issue. So just carefully slide it in. Line up the bolt holes, and we're ready to button everything up. Okay, we pretty much have all the critical parts wrapped up. I still have to replace the rotors and brakes. I need to go to town and get some new parts because mine are in pretty rough shape. If this video is helpful to you, please remember to subscribe to my channel. And I welcome any comments or suggestions that you might have. You can just leave them in the comments section below. Thanks and have a good day.